Hello and welcome to another End User Talk podcast. I'm your hostess, Jamila, your Lady in Tech. Hello and welcome to the End User Talk podcast. This is your hostess, Jamila, your Lady in Tech. And as always, I try to make certain that the content that you all have access to is entertaining, fulfilling, empowering even. But today I'm really excited about this podcast episode. We have with us on this podcast, Eddie Fluellen. And if you aren't aware of that name, you might be able to associate the name with the group called Switch. So what I'm going to do right now is, first off, Eddie, thank you so much for accepting my invitation and being a part of my podcast journey. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. And first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for reaching out and for the invitation. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Anytime. It's my utmost pleasure. Anyone that I have an opportunity to have a guest on my podcast and just be able to share their experiences and kind of get a backstage, if you will, look into everything I'm excited about. But for our guests, those who may not know, we've got some late bloomers, we've got some new school individuals, and I have to say I'm a late bloomer, so
okay, that's all right.
You're speaking to me.
Thanks, that is all right.
Give us a introduction of who you are.
Okay. First of all, my name, like you said, my name is Eddie Fluellen. I'm one of the founding members of the Motown group Switch. Back in the day, we had, you'd probably remember songs such as They'll Never Be, I Want to Be Closer, I Call Your Name, Best Beat in Town, and the list kind of goes on. Like I said, pretty much a founding member. I start out in music as a classical pianist, so I read music and all that. So I love playing, especially I always refer to my classical playing as home, sitting behind a grand piano and playing everything classical. I'm good with that. I totally have a good time with that. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much it.
Well,
it keeps me busy enough.
And you know what? That's amazing.
Thank you. I'm also the music director for Rick James' Stone City Band. As everyone knows, Rick passed quite a few years back, but Stone City Band is rocking and rolling. It's still keeping the punk funk alive. Doing some things with them, and that's an honor to be their music director. We have a great time. The spirit of Rick is still there. And like I said, they're keeping punk funk alive very, very, very well. So,
well, that's an amazing resume of individuals, bands, groups, and areas of body of work that you have there.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about where all this started. So, were you in a household of music, artists, or did this just kind of your interest or involvement in music just kind of organically happen for you?
It's kind of interesting because people have figured that I am from a musical family, and I guess going back from the beginning, my stepfather he was loved jazz, and I remember as a child listening to a lot of jazz music and all that, and it was always great and everything. But as far as like getting started in music. It was a Saturday in February, and I forgot exactly the year. I'm from Akron, Ohio, so we're coming out of the end of winter at the time, and he had one Saturday said, asked me to, well, didn't ask, told me let's go, we're getting in the car. So we got in the car, and the next thing I know, we were at a music store. And he had told me on the way that, if I remember correctly, that, he's going to get me started on piano lessons. And if you're old school, such as I am, it wasn't a request. It was, this is what you're going to do. It wasn't, so I went on ahead with the piano lesson. And the first lesson I remember was very well. I'm a teacher now. I teach piano now. And I remember the first thing from my teacher was that, music is math. And as all elementary kids would probably could probably relate, math, really? No. So we continued on with the lesson, and, the rest, as they say, is history. Practiced for, started out for a little bit of time, and that evolved into about 2.5 hours a day of practicing piano. And I had mentioned that this was like at the end of winter. So we had an old piano that was sitting out in our garage that my grandmother, who had since passed at the time, she had. So we put that garage we put the piano in the garage. And needless to say, if anybody, for those people that are from back east from Ohio, February is still cold. So I'm out there in the garage practicing piano with my overcoat on, hands freezing, 8 years old, 9 years old. And, just kind of kept it moving until one day I went to school and came back home, and my family had purchased a brand new piano. And I stayed on that piano for as long as I'd lived there, and that was the beginning of my musical journey. And again, my stepfather, he loved jazz, and we always had like jazz. I'd say about him, he appreciated music. He loved it. And next thing I know, I'm playing. And years later, he would tell me that, he knew that I would be in music, but had no idea that I'd be, going to be with Motown. He said beyond his wildest dreams, he never expected me to be like with a Motown band, be with a group that was signed to Motown and Mr. Berry Gordy, the one and only Berry Gordy. I remember Switch had done our first showcase for Mr. Gordy himself, and I still hear those words today. He had said, as part of our showcase, I played like this big classical piece. And he had said, as long as he's had Motown, he's never had somebody that played classical as well as I did. And that one I hold close to my heart, So there it is. That's how it all started.
And it was definitely. When you hear someone who was how their journey was, or how they were introduced to instruments, to music, and you hear these individuals who are savants, if you will. What I'd like to know is, being that you started at such a young age, and it sounds like you had a combination of both interest and there was an introduction there as well through your stepfather and jazz, or through jazz. How important is it to have the support of parents and family members through this learning journey?
Fortunately, I had that support, but I got to say, just speaking from personal experience, I think that's extremely important. Then I was from a household where, like I said, it wasn't a request. It wasn't, do you want to go learn how to play? It was, get in the car, we're going to learn how to play piano. Fortunately for me, I took to it. After I'd say almost immediately, I took right to it. And I remember my grandmother even saying, speaking of support, I remember my grandmother, my mother's mother would tell me that she had a feeling at the time. My stepfather's name was Lee, and she had said that, I have a feeling you wouldn't have gotten as good as you did were it not for Lee. And I had never thought about that until she had mentioned that. And this was like years and years and years later. And I never really looked at it from that point of view until she mentioned that. And that so stuck with me, because it is true. If it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't have gotten as good as I did. He was always there. Practicing wasn't an option. I had to practice. To have that support and to have him, even to say that years later, I knew you would get good at it. You got good at it as far as piano, but in my wildest dreams, and that was just not his kind of speak, if you will. But when he said that, again, that stuck with me. And again, my grandmother said that, even what she said, years later, I have a feeling that you wouldn't have gotten as good as you did were it not for him. And again, this is my stepfather. So, I had to agree, she was absolutely right. So yeah, I do think, to your point, support is to me extremely important.
Well, the fruits of your labor have definitely been evident throughout your musical career. As I was getting familiar with your story, your experience, it's noted that you have not only a recording artist, but you're a writer and a producer. And clearly, you just mentioned all of the amazing acts that you have been a part of.
Thank
Um,
you.
of these roles, now I've also heard that when you're learning an instrument, I've heard that piano is one of the most difficult ones to learn, but once you do learn it, you pretty much so have a proficiency in taking on any other instrument. Is that true?
Mhm. You know, I think so. And I'm glad you asked that question because, again, when I started learning how to play piano, I kind of took to it. At the time that I was coming up, horn bands were like a big thing. Bands such as Kool and the Gang, the Ohio Players, Chicago, Blood, Sweat and Tears, all those groups back then, and James Brown, please, I can't believe, Sly and the Family Stone. They all had horns in their bands, and I remember at the time that I played piano like for so long, I wanted a second instrument. And I went, to my teacher at the time, and he's, and I said, as a matter of fact, I wanted to play a horn. So my first horn instrument was actually the tuba, and that was the big things that you had to carry over your shoulder or whatever, with the big mouthpieces, the big bell on the top, and all that, and you carry those things over your shoulder with the big bass sound and everything. And that was my first introduction to a horn instrument. And it's funny, I always tell this story. I remember, with all these different bands and everything, I play piano, but I want to keep it separate. I want to keep classical over there. I don't want to play R&B and jazz and all this stuff on the piano. I want to keep my classical over there, but I want to get with the band, and the only way that I can get with the band is like to play a horn. So I graduated from playing tuba, and I remember I had pretty much gone down the list as far as like horn instruments and everything. I would literally bring like a different instrument home every weekend. Trumpet was to go from like such a huge mouthpiece to a small mouthpiece. I just didn't agree. Went through all the brass instruments. Went through I think a couple of the string instruments. Went through woodwind instruments, and none of them I didn't agree with. One day in my band at school, that's Brookville High School for all my Akron family. My band director, was James Lucas, he played French horn, and the trombone section in the band at that time was having an extreme difficulty playing this one particular section. And I've come to find out most teachers, if you're going to be like a band director or choral director, you have to have some knowledge of like all the instruments. Seeing as how he played French horn, and again, the trombone player was having a hard time. The trombone section was having a hard time playing this one part. He went back and he put together a trombone. He got his trombone and put everything together. And he was up on a podium, right, in front of, so he's like raised above the whole band. And I was sitting at the piano, and I'll never forget, when I looked at him, it was literally like God opened up the sky and shone like the sun on him, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I want to learn how to play. And he literally, like that day, said that I can take a trombone home. And my sister, as a matter of fact, my mom was pregnant at the time. And that weekend that I took a trombone home, I took like all of my trombone books, as many trombone books as he would give me. I took them home that weekend, and I spent the weekend over at my grandma's house because, as it turns out, my mother had gone into labor that weekend with my little sister. And as I spent the night over at my grandmother's house, my grandmother, bless her heart, would let me blow that horn, for hours and hours and hours on end. And I just practiced and practiced and practiced and all that. And, that's how the trombone came about. And I probably got like way off base here. I forgot what your original question was. So sorry about that.
No, it's perfect. I mean, you're just still providing us a timeline of your growth, your development, and how you became introduced to each instrument. And I mean, and I think that is also important when we're going through our journey. A lot of people think that they should pick up one instrument, or you think, you're watching all of your favorite musicians and band players, and you're like, man, I am really drawn to the drums or the electric guitar. And when you're going out and you're saying, well, which one of these is me? Sometimes we think that, the first instrument that we picked up, that was the instrument for us. And sometimes we find out through our musical journey that it might be something that we're a little bit more akin to, that speaks to us. So I'm grateful that you've shown, and you're basically showing us your development, because everybody's path is so different.
That's true. That's true.
It is. And it's what speaks to you, and what you feel comfortable with.
Very true. It's funny. I teach piano and trombone, as a matter of fact, and I have a student now. As a matter of fact, I just got in from that student who, a young lady, and she's learning how to play trombone. And to your point, she started out I started out teaching her piano, and she just, weeks and weeks, I should say, like a few years have gone by, and you can see that she just, just was not getting into it or whatever. But her mom insisted that, she had to learn how to play an instrument, and I said, we didn't see enough, women playing like horns or whatever. What would you think about trombone? I can teach that. And her mom got her a trombone, and she took to playing the trombone. So to your point, sometimes that first instrument is not the one. If you're interested in music, you just search until you find that instrument that's like you said, that's akin to what you want to do. So so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I'm literally experiencing that with a student of mine right now.
That's one of those things that you have to be able to identify outside of, just a natural ability, because, everybody isn't necessarily born with a natural ability, but you can be learned or taught. I wanted to know this. Now, the band Switch at this stage, it's legendary. For most of us, the individuals that were introduced. Now, I'm going to have to say this. In my research, I did find out that I was born in 1976. So I noticed that when the band was put together, it was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but Gregory Williams is the founder, or who put the band together. Am I correct in that?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. This is what I want to know. Maybe this isn't your wheelhouse. Maybe I need to reach out to Gregory. But when you are forming or putting together a band or a group, how do you know which instruments to assemble? Who does well? And if you're going to bring in singing and harmonies, how do you know how to put the specific music instruments together, the voices, and how does that collection take place? Or what's involved in that, if you can answer it?
That kind of comes along with the experience of the instrument, and like your musical knowledge and a vision. What are you saying? If you put a band together, what kind of music do you want to do? And to your question, what kind of instrumentation do you want? There are a lot of singing groups out there, and they're like, okay, I want to put together a singing group, and are we well versed in harmonies? Or are my singers good? Is my voice good enough to put together a singing group? And Greg's thing, in Greg's vision, he had this vision of, first of all, putting together a band. At the time, it was going to be a horn band. I had played trombone. Greg played trumpet, and we had another friend of mine that had played sax. But also, Greg, in his initial search, he wanted people that played more than one instrument, which he first started out talking to Philip Ingram, the younger brother of James Ingram, and Philip and I we've been friends since we were teenagers. So Greg had approached Philip, and in turn approached me, and I remember the day he came over, I pretty much had music charts purposefully strewn all over the place, and just show him that yes, I'm the guy that you want. And I had my piano, and my trombone was out and everything, and it just kind of went on from there. But yeah, it's pretty much, you have to have an initial vision that comes from your knowledge of music and your own personal experience in music.
Okay, so you've done some pretty interesting name drops here. In your experience. Okay, so as I stated, Switch is one of those bands that would be amongst the list of the Gap Band and some of the other well-known bands. But when
Mm-hmm.
you all started, when you all collectively got together and honed your abilities, now usually when someone sets out to do something, in most cases your intent is to be great, to be famous.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you think about when you all finally got everything together and you have Gregory, yourself, you've got Philip, you've got the DeBarge brothers, Bobby and Tommy, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
else that contributed to the original formation of the band. Did you all
Mm-hmm.
think that it would be what it was, what it became to be?
We did. I can't say we didn't. We did, and individually, I mean, even Philip and I, and a couple of the other guys, music was in us. We pretty much knew as kids that we were going to go on and do this thing. We were going to get in the business. It was like breathing. I mean, there was no choice. We just knew that we were going to do that. And as far as what became Switch, as far as that was concerned, we all shared Greg's vision, and we did what we needed to do to make sure that happened. Required work, required sacrifices, but we were going to make it happen. And fortunately for us, it did.
Now, in addition to all of that, and like I said, I've done as much research as I possibly can. Again, unfortunately, I didn't grow up in a household where what we call now old school and the classics. I didn't become introduced to a lot of those things until my later adult life. So all of this is kind of it's new to me, but it's also exciting just to see the amount of talent within you all's group. There was so much talent. Now I do recall, and I want to say it was in the Unsung episode where Gregory his main goal was, one, to get not just a band where we played instruments, but everyone could sing. Usually when you put together a group, in most cases, everybody kind of stays in their own wheelhouse. Whatever you're an expert in or whatever you're good at, you stay there. And those roles don't ever generally cross over. And when you do have lead singers, if you will, it's usually one. And then you have your background vocals. But to watch you all's performance in all of the videos and live performances, all of you blended so well.
Thank you. That was one of the things that we were blessed to have. Again, I'd known Philip since our mid-teens. So I knew, Philip, I knew him, I met him when I think he was 15 at the time. And he sounds good now, and he sounded good from the moment I met him. And I remember thinking, man, you sound like that, and you're not, you're just you're barely out of middle school, And he sounded so good. And I remember even like playing trombone, and playing piano. I was fortunate enough to be in, and I think that was pretty much the thing with like all the high school bands. We looked at that as, the high school musicians, we looked at it as a professional thing. It wasn't like we were learning how to play the instrument and all that in band. We did that on our own personal time, and when we came together, we all sounded good. I remember, looking back, and of course you don't think about that like while you're going through it because you expect that's the way it's supposed to be. But, looking back on it, I remember, we had like a lot of like local bands that were like at the professional level, and we're all in our teens. And, that is no exaggeration. That is we had like what was called the Battle of the Bands there, which I'm sure most bands are familiar with. And these bands were like top notch. And again, we're talking like our early 20s, like, late teens or whatever. And every single band that we played with, it was literally like a battle of bands. It wasn't like, this band was good and that band wasn't. All those bands were good. Every single musician that I met back in Akron when I was growing up, they were all good. And it was a respectful competition. Everybody was good. In Switch's case, we had, fortunately for us, and Greg's vision was to have people that played like, they could do more than one thing, not just play keyboard, not just play trumpet. In Philip's case, Philip was a great percussionist. Really great, really good. He had congas, everything percussion. Philip he was really good at, on top of the fact that he could sing so well and totally energetic, could really entertain the audience from the front of the stage and everything. So Philip was pretty much all over the place. And me, I was keyboard player, trombone. Greg was trumpet, keys. Bobby, of course, his, vocals is legendary, as well as Phyllis. I mean, their vocals were just legendary. Bobby was good with that. He could play keys. He could also play drums, had a very good pocket on drums. And I can go on down the list. But, and those vocal harmonies, fortunately for us, everybody in the band had great vocals, and everybody blended well and everything. So, Again, you mentioned Gregory Williams. Got to credit him that, because again, he put the original members together, and here we are.
Now, I do want to talk about that, because you brought out a great point. The age. What age were you members at that particular time?
We were all in our early 20s. Okay. Philip, I think Philip was the youngest at the time, so I think Philip may have been like 19, maybe 20. But definitely we were all in our early 20s.
Okay, and you're right. I mean, when I went over and they were introducing each bandmate, it was definitely amazing to see. Again, I mean, Switch had undeniable talent. It was just undeniable. It was pure. It was untapped.
Thank you.
And to be able to hear all of the names, like you said, Philip Ingram. I mean, I was aware of James Ingram. I didn't know that he had a brother.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Philip is James's younger brother. And if you come to our show, I'm not going to share that part, but it's
okay.
We paid a tribute to James, and Philip pretty much breaks down like the whole story as far as like, how he came to be the vocalist that he is. And of course he gives all the credit to James. He's watching his older brother, and I'm totally like, I said I was going to wait till to come to the show, but he shares the influence that his brother had on him as far as singing. And needless to say, everybody knows James Ingram, and his vocals are phenomenal. And, if you've heard Philip, it's pretty much the same. And, Philip, incredible vocal, incredible ear.
Right.
And again, I mean, just dynamic on the stage.
Right. I mean, it's just to think about young men at that age. And then you also have to also consider the time. In the 70s, we're dealing with, getting out of leaving segregation.
Oh my gosh.
And you know what? I like talking about that, because Black people had it hard. Now, you know more because you were closer to it than myself. I'm just, that person that's on the outside looking in. And to be able, there was so much pressure on Black people in general, male and female, but for Black men, young Black men, you were dealing with so many pressures. There were the pressures of just police brutality, trying to learn how to navigate. And I couldn't imagine how difficult it would be to be a young man, just trying to find himself.
That's a great point. I remember, coming up at the time, I'm playing classical piano, the Bachs and the Beethovens and the Mozarts and all that. And during the summer and, of course, spring and everything, this is back in the days where we all had screen doors and the front door was open or whatever. So, people in the neighborhood would hear me play. And to your point, I'm a Black kid that's like playing like that kind of music. And I got my weekly, if not daily, ration of being teased in school. I was like the school nerd, playing classical piano and everything. And again, I'm a Black kid playing that. That's for forgive my term, but that's for white people. Black people don't do that. We listen to James Brown, and we do this, we do that, and everything. And I'm like, well, this is what I do. And fortunately, and again, my own personal being would not. There was no choice. I mean, this is what I do. And again, I had made a conscious decision that I'm going to keep my classical separate, and I'm going to keep my band separate. So they'll never mix. Because I do want to go on and become a classical pianist when I grow up. Or a jazz pianist or whatever. But, this is going to be Eddie's thing, and then, over here is going to be Eddie's thing with the band. And it'll strictly play trombone, and that's it. So, yeah, and coming up, it's kind of interesting because just last night I was watching a thing on TV where they were talking about the movies of the time. And one of the points that they mentioned is that, and I can't think of any of those movies, but they mentioned, all the movies that had to deal with, they dealt with racism, they dealt with, of course, the issues of the time and everything. And I hadn't looked at it like that when they were talking about like all the movies that had come out back then. But it was interesting. There were a lot of, the blaxploitation movies and the other movies that focused on, racism and things like that. But again, this movie or this documentary was talking about movies of like the time, and it just so happened I had never looked at it like that, but I could relate. Because I remember watching all those movies and thinking, of course we watched it then for the enjoyment of it, but as far as the historical part of it, looking back on that, I didn't, we live in the present, and to go back and like look back at the past and think, wow, the movies were like, they definitely like, emphasized the time that we were living in at that time. So fortunately for us, we have like those historical records where people can look at, this is the kind of stuff that we were watching. This is what we were going through. Like you said, the racial tension back then was just, man, you can cut it with a knife. It was something. It was really something.
I do want to talk about that just a little bit. It's surprising that, back in the 70s or even earlier, the racial tension and the climate. Now you were on the crux of it, at the, I don't want to say the beginning, but it was heightened there. From your experiences back then to present, do you see, are things better? Have they improved, or are you seeing the same or similarities in our climate today?
Probably similarities. Man, that's a great question. Probably similarities. Obviously, racism has not gone away. Is it better? Again, there's definitely similarities, if not just today. I think it's just outright more blatant. Back then, it wasn't like it was blatant, but like in pockets, if that makes sense, as opposed to like the whole country.
Right. Right.
If that makes sense. Right now, it's pretty much, it's just loud now. I avoid, political conversations or religious conversations because right now nobody cares. I mean, there's no respect even in the conversation. We can't agree to disagree if that's, I mean, it's literally, I had done a blog once where we're not even respectful in our conversation now. We have like technology that allows us to text and do blogs or whatever, and people are like loud. I mean, they're loud in their opinion or whatever. And if you get involved in that conversation, get ready, because it literally turns into like a what's the word, technological fight,
right?
as opposed to physical, And in my blog, I said, now if we're standing in front of each other, it would not be like that. And then again, maybe it would be now. I avoid it. I don't know. It wouldn't be like, I don't know. It seems to be more physical because we don't agree, and it's sad, but that's kind of the way I see it.
Well, unfortunately, this day and time, people are definitely bolder behind screens.
Yeah.
And the fact that people just, you have the individuals out there who are the agitators, and they really don't stand on any ground. They get joy out of being devil's advocate, and saying those things that they know will ruffle feathers. And unfortunately, they have an audience. They have a platform. And people at this stage, as you stated, there is no agree to disagree. There is no you have your opinion, and your opinion is based on whatever. We have to go blow for blow in order for someone to, or for us to feel as if we're being heard or being seen. But I saw a post that you did. I don't recall if it was on Twitter, but you talked about how COVID, being locked down, the isolation, the various mood swings, or just moments, and where your state of mind was during that isolation. And it's wild. I like to watch a lot of apocalyptic or those type of shows, disasters, and I'm a big zombie movie fan. I have no idea. I have no idea why.
That's all right,
it's the survival aspect of it, because when you strip us all down and we don't have anyone or anything else to rely on, you really kind of get to see who you are. And I believe COVID did that for a lot of us, that lockdown. You couldn't run. You had to deal with you.
It's funny. I'm looking back at that post now, and at the time, I remember. COVID. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't like as they were coming to learn. It wasn't the common cold. And I remember even having a difficulty with the term social distance. To me, it didn't make sense. You can't socially, distance from someone. I mean, we are human beings. I mean, being a verb. I mean, we have to be around each other. I come from a family, which started with my grandmother, both my grandmothers at the time, but, we were huggers. We hugged. And my grandmother would refer to all of her grandkids as grandma's baby. Come on over here, grandma. Oh, it's grandma's baby. Come over here, grandma hug. And all of us know, grandma had the best hugs in the world, had the best hugs. And I had come from that family, and to be told that, you can't do that anymore really affected me, really affected me, because that's what I've always done. In fact, I was playing with a band who has, at the time, the leader of the band had told the audience, given the audience like a trivia question. And if you can answer that trivia question, the winner would get a hug from Eddie Fluellen. And if you've never been hugged by him, you'll see how, valuable this is. And it caught me by surprise. I was not planned or whatever. And I'm like, see. So again, back in time, I was angry that, you mean I can't hug anybody? I mean, we can't show any kind of affection. To be told something that our mothers told us, wash your hands, take care of yourself, bathe, don't use words such as stupid or whatever. And now to be reminded as, something that our mothers told us. I mean, what? What? This has become like a policy now, be sure to wash your hands and all that. Aren't you washing your hands anyway?
Yes.
Why are we here? Right. And that was the thing. It was that. And then I remember also during that time that people were like, okay, we have to turn this into a positive. I'm like, there are people around us dying and nothing is being done about it. And I was struggling with that, family members, really good friends of mine that are dying and nothing's being done about it. I'm sorry, I'm having a real hard time being positive, So, and that was that, and I just thought, I've never voiced it like that. I've never spoken out like that. But yeah, at the time I was angry. And that's what I called it. Yes, I'm angry.
Right. Right. And I just,
and that was always the thing, be positive. We have to find the positive in this. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't see. I'm not working. My working stopped. I was extremely busy. Working just literally came to a halt. There was no slowdown. One day I'm working like crazy. The next day I lost all my work. So there was that. To be told again, I can't do anything. You can't, you got to wear a mask all the time. I mean, just all that, and it was just too much, and again, I'm only sharing my own personal experience. It was hard, so I just thought, let me just go ahead and get it out. And that's that blog that you're talking about. Thanks for bringing that up, because that's interesting.
Well, I mean, I brought it up because I interviewed not too long ago Michael Langton, who is an amazing saxophonist, jazz saxophonist, and he was talking about his struggle being a musician. And he said when he was actually traveling, when he'd gotten the news about the lockdown, and how he was like, this is my livelihood. I don't do anything else. And he was struggling with, how am I going to pay my bills?
Yeah, exactly. And fortunately, I got like a lot of people that, they were, had thanked me for even posting that, because that's something that you don't share that. You don't share that you're upset. You don't share that you're having a hard time with this. And I just thought that's my only release. I had to share it, and I did. And, people appreciated it. And I appreciated the people appreciated that. We have to speak up about this. This is not positive at all. This is not positive. And as you're watching the news, I mean, that's all they were talking about. And again, like thousands of people are dying a day, and nothing's being done. And, I'm sorry. So you made me flashback now.
Well, it's okay, because, I feel like it's something that we needed to express, because everyone was, everything was heightened. There was so much, I mean, you had to grapple with during that period. And as you're stating, people always want to try to paint things to be happy. You're not allowed to. Well, there's this phrase now that goes around that says it's okay to not be okay. And we want everyone to paint this facade. If you're on social media, of course, social media in most cases will paint the sunnier side of things, these things that you have this fear of missing out. And during that period, it was very difficult for a lot of people to be able to see beyond what they were going through internally. And a lot of people were suffering, and to be able to, what was your outlet? I mean, where were you going to go and find someone else? And some people were afraid to say that I am feeling bad.
Right.
I am feeling hopeless. Yes, I don't.
You're telling me my home is now a prison.
Yes, literally. And then you're dealing with people barely had toilet paper. And then you see these people who are hoarding things. I'm like, are you kidding me, people?
Right.
But as I stated, this is where you get to see people stripped down.
Very good point. Yes, and boy, didn't we?
Man.
Boy, didn't we.
Okay, we're going to get off of that subject matter, because it's, it's just, we have to deal with the human element, and that was a very human element that we all had to face. But this is what I want to know from you is you've discussed a lot. You've experienced a lot in your personal and in the professional aspect of being a musician. Are you impressed with yourself?
That's a bit of a loaded question. To be honest, no. I think I can do better. In fact, I've last year went back to college. First of all, that was always a dream of mine, was to go back and get my diploma. So I'm working on that now. But I remember, even in the thought process, I remember saying to myself, I just want to be a better musician. I want to be a better songwriter. And that was kind of the impetus as far as going back to school. I know there are people who are like, it's if you just get this grade, you're trying to get the paper. No, I'm trying to get the knowledge. The paper is just reward that, but I'm trying to get the knowledge. So that's kind of where I am. So to your question, no, I always think I can be better.
Okay, segue to that. What do you think would give you that sense of I'm pleased with me and what I've done and what I've accomplished? Do you think there's anything that would get you to that point?
Oh man. I guess for the sake of an answer, I guess see, I'm struggling with the answer. I really don't know. I'm always trying to be better at what I do, both personally and professionally. And I guess if I said yes, there would be an end to that journey. And I'm always on a journey, always on the journey. And I guess to a certain extent, it's fun to be on the journey. I'm always in search of.
I mean, I respect
that. And in
that
this
answer.
case, as far as professionally, to be better. I'm always in search of being better. And there are a billion and one different ways to be better. And I'm always searching.
I mean, I respect that. I mean, that is a great answer. I wasn't looking for anything that was a solution.
Yeah,
but
it's a great question because again, I don't think so. I think I'll always be looking to be better than what I am, yesterday.
You know what, and that's the one thing is we go through this life and we experience things, and you stated earlier that you're just kind of living. You're just doing the thing at the moment. And you're not really, you may set goals for yourself and
oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's like, as you reach those goals, at what point do we ever have an opportunity to sit down and reflect? Because I'm just going to say, being someone who is looking at someone else and in our mind, we feel like you've reached the heights. You're famous, you've done this and you've done that. You're hearing these praises from someone else, but at what point do we look at ourselves, and we're not talking about arrogance, truly saying, you know what, I did that.
Okay. And I do say that. Yeah, and in reference to Switch, I always talk about, we did it. We had just done a gig a few weeks back in Atlanta. And we completely changed our show around, and I was mostly responsible for we need to kick our game up, and we did. We changed our show around. We made it more. I don't know. We've just done the same show for so long. I'm like, okay, we need to do something, and we played that gig in Atlanta, and we left it all on the stage. And I even said, I don't remember the last time I felt proud of our show. And I ended with, we did that. We all did that. I do recitals now. I'm back to playing piano recitals where it's just me and the piano and an audience. And, when I get done, I'm proud of the moment. And I guess kind of looking back, I'm fortunate to say that, hey, I was part of some special things. And Switch being one of those, and, my personal, recitals, I'm proud of those. So, but again, I'm always looking to be better. I'm always looking to be better than I was yesterday.
And there's always room for growth and development. So I definitely get it. Now we're embarking on the close, and I'm going to have to tell you, I've thoroughly, truly enjoyed speaking with you today, learning your journey, and just getting an experience of your personality. It's been amazing. When I reached out to you, I literally was in a YouTube wormhole of documentaries. And Switch was one of those documentaries that I watched, but I reached out to you. I didn't know if you would respond. I'm glad you did. But I mentioned that I was a fellow podcaster, and you too host a podcast. And I want to bring attention to that because that's how I was able to reach out to you. But your podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and more than likely everywhere podcasts can be found. But it's called The Playground with Eddie Fluellen.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, the podcast that caught my attention was the episode you did with, and please forgive me if I mispronounced the name. Also, I believe a bandmate, Akili
Nixon, yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, great. I didn't want to ruin his name.
You did.
Okay. I came across that discussion that you had with Akili, and what I did appreciate about that particular episode is what a lot of those embarking on music careers, they run into the legal aspect. And I really appreciated you taking time not only to discuss the fact that you all are both bandmates of this legendary group called Switch, but that his day job was and some of his skill set was to lend to individuals to help them get better contracts, litigation. We've seen those stories. Where these singers, athletes, even anyone in the entertainment industry, they get a bad contract and they end up with nothing, but they get this world-renowned famous. They're famous. New Edition is one that I could think of right off the bat, who never got the money that they deserved with their fame. But I appreciated you for doing that segment and helping individuals. On that aspect, before we close, what advice do you have for individuals, bands who are seeking to lock in the best deal for themselves? What's some points or tips that you have in order for them to obtain that?
As everybody would say, a good music attorney, and I mean, even have that music attorney checked out by other music attorneys if you can. I know it can be. I mean, back when we were coming up, that very thing was expensive, and to get somebody who was willing to give you good legal advice, good musical business advice, it was hard. But if you have the budget for it or whatever, and definitely don't guess at it. I mean, get people that you trust. Get a team. Get a team of people that you trust that are in it on your behalf. And just stick with it. Don't give up. I mean, this business it's a different animal. It's a whole different animal, and just stick with it. It can be rewarding and frustrating. And I'll say more frustrating, but if you're willing to put in the time and the work and the love for what you do, power on, because you can be successful at this. You had mentioned earlier as far as like learning how to play piano, and is it difficult? I think everything we attempt to do could be difficult if we let it be, whether it be in music or whatever. I mean, it takes a certain amount of training, whether it be personal or you need a team to train you. Go for it. Don't give up. Don't give up. And I'm glad you mentioned the playground, because that was one of the things that I kind of stressed. I wanted to be not so much an interview kind of a thing. It was more, as you probably noticed, I had like veterans on there, and I would say I kind of like to use it as a teaching tool. For those that are coming up in the business, you want to listen to these people, because these people have been there, done that. And, one of the premises of the playground, as we all remember when we were kids, you go on the playground and you get bumps and bruises, but you get back up and go back out there on the playground and play again. And I think that's the premise as far as this. These people are the people that, have gotten the bumps and the bruises and whatever, but, they got back up to play again. And fortunately for me, they were there to share their stories. Akili, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was definitely a special episode, because Akili, great vocalist, and his knowledge of law, period, is amazing. And that he was able to share his part of business law. He was still saying, still see a business attorney. I give you advice, but, go see an entertainment attorney. Go see a music attorney. And I got like a lot of like really good positive, remarks on that particular one, because, there was a lot of things you shared that people, coming into the business did not know. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and the playground too. That was one of my therapy sessions during COVID. It kind of got me through COVID. It started during. At the time, Zoom was not a big deal, and it became a big deal through COVID. So, I'm speaking of being proud. That's one. I'm definitely proud of that. It was awesome, and Eddie got to step out on his own and do something, which is like Eddie doesn't do that. So,
right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I am again very grateful and appreciative to you. My father is deceased, but I know that if he was looking down or had the opportunity to reach out to me, he'd be like, Jamila, you did that. You got to hold the switch.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time on this day. But before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to be able to extend any type of, if you have any dates, where we can find you or listen to the podcast, just anything Eddie Fluellen.
Oh, thank you.
Please, this is your opportunity. If you have people you want to thank or send shout outs to, this is you.
Oh my gosh. Man, as far as like performances, I mean, Switch to coin a phrase that I started using, Switch is on the move for 2022 and moving forward. We do have some dates that are going to be coming up. Let's see. Look at those now because it's a lot, fortunately for us. And again, I'm playing with, a few different acts. Let's see. We have New Orleans, and I think Carson, California. Stone City is going to be doing a thing in San Francisco. Switch is doing a thing in Lynchburg. Wow, it's a lot. So look out for Switch in your city. I mean, we're doing the things. And as far as special thanks, friends and family, too many to name. My brothers in Switch, man, just a lot of people. So to everybody, I mean, thank you for your support. Jamila, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for your support as well. Thank you for mentioning the playground, my producers, everybody with the playground, and hopefully I can keep it interesting to those that are listening. And I guess that's it. So thank you, and thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you. And Eddie, again, thank you. Continued success, longevity, peace of mind, and happiness and enjoyment in everything that you do for yourself personally, professionally, and anyone who is blessed and has that special of opportunity of being able to work with you and in your space and learn and enjoy. I hope all of that continues. You're continuing to be happy with that.
Thank you.
But we thank you for your contributions to music and everything else. It means a lot. And they say music is that thing that is universal in healing and sometimes bringing people together. So thank you for your contribution.
Thank you, Jamila, and again, thank you so much for the invitation. This was fun. I didn't know that I was going to have so much to say, but you had such great questions I had to answer. So great questions.
Well,
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We've come to the close of another episode of the End User Talk podcast. I hope that what you've heard today will leave you feeling empowered. Thank you for listening, and remember, every day's a training day.